My impulsive brain just wanted to be like, hey, Laurel, you're so fine. You're so fine. Hey, Laurel. Hey, Laurel.
I mean, you just did, so there you go.
There we go. This is the Conscious Mental Health Podcast for curious clients and conscious clinicians. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered health or mental health advice.
Hello. Welcome, everyone.
I'm Juniper, licensed clinical social worker and mental health educator.
And I'm Laurel. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a mental health educator.
And we're here today with a short that I think you might have suggested. I can't remember.
I think I probably did because it bugs me. So I was like, we need to talk about this. This is annoying to me. Yeah. And usually the things I want to talk about, it's because it's annoying me.
And I want to see how annoyed other people are around this. And typically, sometimes it's just you and I that are annoyed.
And that's fine.
Right?
But it doesn't mean it's not a valuable conversation.
Yes. Our thoughts and feelings are highly valuable.
Agreed.
Because we all have dignity and worth. But yeah, serotonin and dopamine are having another moment.
They're so popular. They're the popular girls.
Yeah.
What's the difference between dopamine and serotonin?
Serotonin, please.
Number one serotonin myth.
Your serotonin levels are low.
The dopamine detox is a lie.
Here are 3 ways to boost your serotonin to feel an increased sense of happiness and peace.
So you can actually see a part of the brain light up when you're feeling good.
Dopamine, a fun molecule that you've probably heard of.
Stop pursuing cheap dopamine.
Basically found the core reason why I was deficient in serotonin.
Pleasure and stress are the enemies of happiness and contentment. Cheerios is winning.
Like all the other neurotransmitters, but serotonin and dopamine are just, they're the it's.
Poor little other transmitters.
I know. I kind of felt bad for them when I was like doing some of the research on this. This is so embarrassing. Okay, so whenever I'm in charge, I typically will like write stuff up because I get nervous. I won't stay on script, even though we don't have scripts, but I make a script for myself.
Can you all tell we don't have a script? Is that like a,
right?
Are we revealing a secret right now?
No, we do not have scripts. So, but I wrote, seems those hardworking neurotransmitters have wiggled their way into everyday conversations, especially in the self-help, wellness, and health spaces.
Well, that's true. All of that's true.
And I did wiggle because of how like neurons go and fire. I feel that they wiggle, but they probably don't. It's probably just like a flash.
You know what? If you zoom in really close, maybe there's a little wiggle.
Just a little wormy wiggle.
My money don't jiggle, jiggle, it falls. I like to see you wiggle, wiggle, for sure.
You know, what I noticed when I started looking up, I looked up memes on Instagram or different like topics, and then TikTok and YouTube. Those are my top 3. You know who really loves to talk about serotonin and dopamine? People in the biohacking world.
Oh, wow. That's quite a rabbit hole.
I did go down it a little bit. So real quick, Laurel, what do you think of when you think of biohacking?
I actually haven't been down this rabbit hole much, but what I think of is like tips to change your biology or something about tips to like adjust, like have control over some biological process of yours.
Yeah. It's a quick little thing you can do in just 5 minutes a day.
Okay. So like a quick tip.
Yeah. A very famous biohacker, probably the Freud of biohacking, is Dave Asprey.
Would you believe that kale is a big psyop?
Who came up with bulletproof coffee. And bulletproof coffee was the only thing you had to do was just to put butter in your coffee, and then all of a sudden it solved all your problems of your life. It solved your hormones. It solved your mood. It did everything.
I do know what bulletproof coffee is. I actually had no idea it was a biohack. I just thought it was like something that people like, I don't know. Oh, tasted good or something.
It's a hack. It is part of the intermittent fasting world.
Oh.
So you're supposed to drink the bulletproof, then you don't eat until like 2 p.m. And Dave Asprey now has like transformed themselves into leaders in the biohacking world.
You should be taping your mouth. It's one of the cheapest biohacks that works so well.
Hormonal, chemical, industrial birth control is a crime against women.
You offered me a plate of French fries and a cigarette and said you have to do one of the two. The cigarette causes inflammation for less time than the French fries, and the cigarette has nicotine, which at least is a smart drug.
That you do one thing for like 15 minutes a day and magically solves the dilemma of the human body. They really focus on like happiness, peak performance, and internal youth. I saw someone say the last crumb of serotonin, you've seen those memes, being used as almost like a metaphor of like my last little bit of happiness in this day.
Right.
So it's like a metaphor now.
Okay.
Are you getting that?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I've seen that exact meme. My last crumb of serotonin, or my last drop, or like my last serotonin molecule just like hanging on strong.
Yeah. Dopamine dressing for dopamine. You've seen that come across possibly.
Is that like using your clothing to boost, like theoretically boost your dopamine production?
That's what they say.
Okay.
What do the memes get wrong? What do they get right? What are false claims? And essentially oversimplifications.
Right.
Which is really hard to do in a 30-second TikTok or like a literal meme.
Well, I feel like memes are just generally oversimplifications, and that's often what makes them funny. But I think it's interesting that those things are now being taken and used by, it's not just a meme anymore. Like people are building businesses and theories, life routines around what was essentially like oversimplification to be a funny meme.
Yeah. The reason why we're particularly interested in this is because serotonin and dopamine are often spoken of in a mental health context.
Yeah, for sure. It's very easy to do that, right? Because we want things to make sense and we want there to be a formula for something. And I think there's a reason for this. People associate serotonin now with depression.
Mm-hmm.
And partly, I think, is because the primary drugs that are prescribed for depression, like Prozac and Zoloft, are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, right? So people hear that, they try to understand, like, this is how this medication is working for me to improve my depression. Therefore, serotonin must be like directly connected to my mood and whether I'm depressed or not, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like totally understandable that it gets oversimplified.
It's really scary to have something happening to you that's uncomfortable or difficult that you don't understand, but also that you feel that you can't control. And so I think what happens is, especially in the biohacking world, but in any of it, like if you get sunlight, you can increase your serotonin, which means you'll be happier. That does not sound horrible. But when we look at the science and you hear from people that spend their entire careers just focusing on neurotransmitters, for example, or the endocrine system, for example, which are hormones, it's so much more complex than that because every body is different, like body. Every environmental situation is different. And so if only it could be so simple. But yeah, unfortunately, in some instances, people can spend a lot of money on supplements thinking that it's going to boost their serotonin, and it does nothing. And they might not seek out other treatment that might be more helpful.
Right. And also, do we want to boost our serotonin? Like
exactly.
Okay, so
I wrote a whole lot more, but we're going to go right on past that. I wrote a whole poem about how fragile the body is and a complex entity.
I love it.
But we're not going to talk about that. But I wanted to offer my very simplistic, basic understanding of neurotransmitters and why in mental health contexts they're discussed, especially serotonin and dopamine.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers in the brain that enable communication between nerve cells, often called neurons. Well, they are called neurons.
They are called neurons. Well,
throughout the
brain.
Entire body. They play much more complex roles than mood boosters and pleasure chemicals. I think this will help provide context because, for example, I suffered through 3 Andrew Huberman lab podcasts. And Andrew Huberman is another person that's involved in the biohacking industry.
Yeah,
we would say he's like a pretty big time biohacker.
And I have heard of him.
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, we know about it. Hey, also a controversial subject. And I was like listening to it and all of a sudden it started getting all jumbled up.
If someone who's depressed, what they need to do is get up early, get some light in their eyes, get some movement.
Tyrosine, the amino acid, is the rate-limiting enzyme for the synthesis of dopamine.
So dopamine and testosterone are closely related in the pituitary system.
Dopamine that just arrives because you say, oh, you're here, so you get reward. Terrible.
If you want more testosterone surging through your body, here's what you got to do. You got to sunbathe your taint and your balls. Have y'all heard of that?
I just dissociated. I don't know what you just said because I blacked out.
You have heard of people tanning
Of course I
their
have.
tanning their taints,
Yes.
because that is like the peak height of biohacking.
Are you sunning your balls, man?
You guys ask about the butthole sunning all the time. It's well known that your sphincter or your butthole is one of the most sensitive or thin mucous membranes in the body. 30 seconds of sun on the butthole is like 8 hours of sun outside with your clothes on.
I sun my balls every single day, and you should too.
Say you hear something like this. Dopamine is involved in motivation, learning, movement, and reward anticipation.
Yes.
Okay. What the hell does that mean? It's involved in. Okay. So limited understanding. Dopamine is synthesized. It's stored in parts of the brain. It's like 3 different parts of the brain. And when you anticipate something rewarding, like food or a fun activity,
snacks,
the brain areas involved in emotions and decision making, like amygdala prefrontal, send signals to the home of where the dopamine lives, the VTA, and they say, time to release the dopamine. Bring them out.
Is that what yours sounds like? Is that what your brain sounds like?
Oh no, mine are like SOS, major support needed to open mail.
There's just alarm sounds. Yeah. No voice in my. It's just like no voices.
Yeah. They must think that something great will happen when they open the mail, not just a bill that they haven't paid from a parking ticket 6 years ago. The alarm is sounded. And again, how does the brain know that you might be anticipating something rewarding? Sensory, anticipation, memory, learning. There's so many things that are involved of why the brain would say, hey, we need some motivation, for example. Based on the anticipation and how much the brain thinks it's going to need, it signals them to release. And so basically all they do is they be like, boop, 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 and they go along the neural pathway and then they bind to a receptor. Remember this from your classes?
Kinda.
Okay. I took anatomy like 6 times. This was my favorite part. So anyways, it binds to a receptor in another part of the brain that is typically going to like do a cascade effect. So that's why this is super complex. It's not like dopamine goes and it says, hey dudes, and then it like sends a hormone, for example. It's just not that simple.
Of course it's not.
It binds to the receptor, activates them to send signals that creates a motivated feeling. So if my body knows that I will not open my mail, it's going to say, they need to feel motivated to open this mail or they're not going to do it. And this makes sense from a level of survival because we have to do things we don't want to do probably to survive, like go through woods and get poison ivy and have to pick berries.
Or open our mail.
Exactly. Which is helpful to be like, I can do this. Basically, it also triggers other brain regions to release more chemicals and hormones and other things that prepare your body to act, like increasing focus or energy. This is also where you're going to hear some people talking about, and there is truth to this, that the brain starts to learn and remember what motivates it because what rewards that motivation.
Sure.
Right?
I think we know that even beyond the like science of it.
Exactly. Like if you do something like something, your brain starts to say, oh, well, we're going to get rewarded if we do this. So we're going to motivate ourselves to do this because we're going to get a reward at the end of the tunnel, right? The brain's like, this feels good. Like, let's keep going. And so, yeah, that's basically what happens, but it is a chain reaction. And I got all into it because I just personally wanted to make sure I understood the science. And that's how serotonin works too.
Okay.
Right. But serotonin doesn't come from when the body says, I need motivation.
No, it's totally different chemical.
Yeah.
Which I think is another thing that people get wrong.
Yeah. Let's just talk about mental health in the brain because serotonin does a lot of things, but it creates a calming, stabilizing effect in the brain, which really helps with emotional regulation and like balance.
Right. So it's not a happy chemical.
No.
Quote unquote.
Yeah.
Which could we call anything that, but it's not a happy only chemical. It's a stabilizing.
Stabilizing
chemical.
is the key word.
Yeah.
That's why it's linked to like maybe overall sense of well-being and calm because it's part of that process. But yeah, stabilizing is the key. And what would be like an example in your mind of stabilizing that isn't necessarily calm and relaxed and serene?
The first thing that comes up is like being able to regulate myself through stress.
Mm-hmm.
So it might not be calm, but my stress isn't overwhelming me to the point where I can't function.
That is the exact example I was thinking in my mind.
I'm a genius.
You really are. It really works a lot with the autonomic nervous system, which is part of that stress or fight or flight, freeze, appease pathway.
Right. Well, I think the other thing that they're talked about a lot for mental health is, again, kind of going back to medication.
Yeah.
So many of the medications that we would use or take or our clients might take to help with mental health challenges are based in understanding some kind of neurotransmitter process, right? So
Exactly.
again, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors for depression, ADHD medications, often in reference to understanding dopamine. There's other medications that work on norepinephrine. I think that helps us to understandably more safe and comfortable with taking these medications because we want to know, like, when I take this medicine, what's it doing in my body?
Right. Or people that might not want to be on medication will say, what can I do that the medication does? But here's what's interesting. The serotonin deficiency theory, or that like original theory of a chemical imbalance,
Right.
if you want to call it that, is now, I don't want to say debunked, but a lot of scientists and just probably people in general are seeing that it's a lot more complex than that.
Yeah, I don't think it's debunked entirely because we do know that those medications work in some form or fashion, but it's not linear.
Yeah, it works because it gives you more serotonin.
Yeah,
That's
that's not how it
actually not
works.
true.
Yeah.
And what I found really interesting is that, like, depression, for example, you brought that up. It involves a mix of neurotransmitters, right? Like you mentioned, dopamine and norepinephrine, but also other factors, genetics, inflammation, even gut health. The research now is focusing on the brain structure and how all those interact. And actually, there's some research that says they're not even exactly sure why the SSRIs work. It doesn't work for everyone.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's what's really interesting, is that there's so many other factors that are involved with how they work. And some of it's still kind of unknown, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of people sometimes feel very frustrated because they have to try a lot of different medications or their side effects.
Very fair, but also it's very scary, right? It's scary to say, well, we know this works, but we're maybe not sure why it works.
Yeah.
And we're not really sure if it's going to work for you. And if it doesn't work for you, we're not going to be really sure why it didn't work for you. Just like we're not really sure why it did work for that other person. And so that's really frightening. I think very real. And I mean, there's so much that we just have no idea about the brain, like so complicated, so complex. Like,
it's like the deep ocean.
It's really complicated.
Yeah.
That also is scary. It's
Yeah.
scary to not have a formula.
Yeah.
So
Also,
I think
for us mental health providers,
yeah, like, oh my God,
that's
what
why
are we doing?
we're constantly like, it's an art and a science.
We're doing our best, y'all.
Yeah.
But sometimes nobody knows. And so I think it's very comforting to be able to say, well, I do know.
100%.
I figured it out.
Yeah. Because it worked for me.
Nobody else did. None of these other professionals who have dedicated their lives to this study has figured it out, but I sure have.
I really think this leads us well into that's why it's being talked about so much. And there's lots of reasons, well-intentioned, and some maybe not so much. So let's start about the very first one that you see all over the place. I'm going to say it, and then I would love for you to share what came up the very first part of your For You, or what was that page?
My Explore page.
Your Explore page on
because I am
Insta.
not on the TikToks.
Right. So 95% of serotonin is found in your gut. How many? Raise your hand if you've heard that multiple times.
Well, I'll tell you what came up on my Explore page when I simply searched the term serotonin. Not even gut, just serotonin. So there's a post very top that says, stop saying 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. And then 2 posts down, it says 70% of serotonin is made in your gut. What's going on in your gut is going to affect your mood, anxiety, depression, and focus. So how am I supposed to know which one is right? There's no consistency.
Right.
And it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
95% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut. And that's true. That is a true fact. They're also suggesting that this gut serotonin is the same as the serotonin in our brain that like works with mood and behavior. And so while it's true that the gut does produce serotonin, it's really cool. the serotonin that's produced in the gut primarily helps regulate digestion, and it actually doesn't directly impact mood or mental health because guess what? It doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier.
Oh, tricky.
Yeah, there's a thing called the blood-brain barrier.
Yes, there is.
And I'm so glad there is because I don't want a lot of things crossing up into my brain.
Stay out of my brain.
Yeah.
I am so glad we have that. Woo!
3 essential oils to protect against brain parasites.
Were you in my brain?
Claiming that gut serotonin directly causes or cures mental health issues really just, again, oversimplifies the relationship. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that makes sense because it all keeps coming back to I have to live in this body and I want to understand what is going on. And so if I can have these puzzle pieces of like serotonin in the gut, serotonin mood stabilizing, heal my gut, I heal my mood, like that feels so like good to me because it offers me so much potential for control.
Yeah.
Right. But of course, it's going to be more complex than that.
It just is. And yes, there are lifestyle modifications that do help with various aspects of mental health. 100%. Like movement. And yes, some issues with the gut. For example, let's think about IBS. You see a lot of connection with IBS and anxiety. It's not always, though, physical. Some of it is because you never know when you have to use the restroom and it's very painful and it's very uncomfortable. So again, there's so many factors beyond serotonin alone. And I think that's just the key here. We're not trying to burst anyone's bubble.
Just like with a lot of the things we talk about, I would love a quick fix. And that's just not how my understanding of like mental health works.
I would love it too, because wouldn't that be so awesome for someone to come into the office and you could just be like, boop, 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 boop. And then it's like, they're like, yes, I love this.
You're fixed.
Yeah.
Done.
It only cost me $100 and I'm done.
You never have to work on anything ever again. You're just going to coast to the end.
Wouldn't that be so freaking cool?
I would love that.
The one I saw coming up probably the most, besides dietary things, which I think we already covered in the gut part, is getting 10 to 15 minutes of sun exposure.
Okay.
Just get sun.
Just
about 10 to 15. And then your serotonin levels are boosted and so are your mood.
Okay.
Did you ever see anything like that?
I mean, I feel like I see lots of things. I think that also makes me think of like the happy lights, which I do have one.
Same. I have multiple.
And I do notice a difference.
I never use it.
I don't use it consistently, but all the time, but when I do use it, I do notice a difference. But like, I think that goes to, it's like the light levels are allegedly, again, there's like this belief that there's a direct connection.
Yeah.
So,
and there is a little bit.
Yeah.
So for example, one of the theories behind that is that when the sun hits the retina, it does signal serotonin production. And this makes sense. Is if you think of the body's circadian rhythms, when you wake up and it's light outside, it's like, oops, better get some energy because it's light. You got to do all the things.
Gotta go work on the farm
and weave a basket and like do
absolutely.
The things. Serotonin is produced more in the body during the day than it is during the night. The idea that it improves your mood is a little oversimplified. It's more so that it's a part of the daily circadian rhythm, but that could, if you were to like make the connection of, you hear people have lower moods in darker periods, but we just were talking about this in another episode. It could be that you're just tired, because there's also studies of people living in areas that have various levels of sunlight in different parts of the world that it doesn't fit this mold.
In a lot of the countries that are often studied or named as quote unquote happiest are some of like the darkest places or the places that get the least sunlight.
Right.
I do think it makes sense. It has to do more with energy than directly mood, because, a lot of people who are experiencing depressive symptoms, like low energy and fatigue is one of those. And I think it's a cyclical thing. Like if I'm tired and very low energy, that actually might contribute to my mood. I don't like feeling tired.
Oh, hi guys. Just doing my morning ritual, staring into the sun. The amount of vitamin D through the body release inflammation is vital.
It doesn't guarantee a major boost of serotonin or mood for everyone. It depends on factors like time of day, skin type, geographic location.
Of course. Yeah, of course it does. Because again, we're not a math formula.
I mean, are we just going to be saying this all
Andrew
the time?
Huberman wishes we were.
Oh, so anyway, when the sunlight doesn't hit the retina anymore, the brain shifts to produce melatonin, which is responsible for sleep, or one of the things. And I find that really interesting because melatonin is synthesized from serotonin. Would you ever tell someone don't get sun exposure?
No.
Or like light exposure?
Unless they had a skin condition and their doctor told them not to get sun exposure. And then I might affirm that.
There we go.
Recommendation.
Thank
but
you.
other than that,
right.
No.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt.
Yeah,
it feels
not.
good.
Might boost your mood.
Okay. How many times have you heard that dopamine is the pleasure or reward chemical?
All the time. I'm sure I'm guilty of also saying that. Like,
right.
I think like I've perpetuated that myth.
Oh, well, like I'll say things like, that was a dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm. Same.
But we were really getting hit with a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So we already kind of talked about this, but a dopamine hit or a dopamine rush kind of implies that like you're getting happiness or euphoria-ish.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, because we did the dopamine menu.
Right.
Which is cute.
Yeah.
But probably bad science.
A lot of this is a metaphor or used in like a self-help language. It's more like a metaphor or a way to talk about these things rather than like actual science.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true because I don't think about that as like actual science. But clearly, people do.
Or it's not the full picture. And that's why it's like big into the self-help, but it's really meant as like speaking of like ideas or metaphors rather than like it actually working. I mean, you can see that popping up in all different things in pop psychology. Dopamine is more about motivation and anticipation than the pleasure piece. It drives you to pursue rewards or goals, and they really want you to take the desired action. Your brain's like, do this. So it's the wanting rather than the liking chemical.
That makes sense.
And when my former psychiatric nurse practitioner recommended me to read Dopamine Nation, it was kind of talking about that. So it is often referenced in addictions. You know, let's talk about internet or social media addiction.
Understanding smartphones and how they work. And
because it's the wanting piece, the wanting piece, the craving, because that's what the brain is used to using to make you do something that you like or that you get a reward from. The surge is the anticipation, but not the pleasure. And that comes with other stuff. Oxytocin, a little bit of serotonin, endocannabinoids.
Ooh.
Yeah, those are the actual pleasurable sensations that make you feel good.
Oh, those endocannabinoids.
I know.
Love them.
Lots of different receptors in our brains.
Is that going to be the next one that's like hot?
Oh,
in pop psychology.
I'm surprised it hasn't been, but I think it's too hard to say.
It's tricky to say.
Yeah. Hot prediction.
Which going to be the next one?
Right.
Okay. Do you think it's going to be endocannabinoids?
Or oxytocin?
I think it's going to be oxytocin.
Yeah.
Because that also is a little bit more of a well-known thing.
Yeah. And that's something that I would like to bring up now, I think. When people are talking about this, they're acting like everyone's brain and body and situation are the same. And a lot of things like ADHD, depression, schizophrenia, OCD, the brain's going to look different for every single person within those categories.
Yeah, we didn't all
get
the same brain.
Yeah.
And it's not like an assembly line.
So if you're trying to get a dopamine boost, but you already are deficient or overly producing, a lot of times when you see those like basic things, they're saying like almost like anyone will get a boost from sunlight. Anyone would do well to do gut health. Just do gut health.
Including you, which is why you should pay me so much money to do your gut health.
Yeah. But the reality is that there's so many differences. And then I started to think when I was doing this research, like, okay, but if you're in the middle of a very stressful situation or a chronic stressor, recovering from a natural disaster, or you've suffered a very severe trauma, I don't think sunlight is going to do nothing.
I was supposed to say, I was thinking as you said that, you mean that sunning my butthole isn't going to get rid of my PTSD?
Yeah.
If I'm actively in the middle of a stressor?
Yeah. And I can even see that as being a little demeaning.
It is demeaning.
Or like almost gaslighty. Say you're going through something so intense, even collectively in a community, maybe through an active civil war or something like that. And my sense is that that's not top of the list.
Probably not.
Yeah. Not top of the list to boost your dopamine or your serotonin. Unfortunately, the hacks are probably not enough.
Yeah, I think it's just a privilege thing when it comes down to it. I mean, can we be honest? Like, I mean, it's just, it sounds nice, but it totally ignores all of the other factors like that could be contributing to your lived experience.
I mean, Laurel, are you having chronic stress from poverty? Not being able to access food for your family? I believe you should cold plunge for 15 minutes a day. Just cold plunge. And then do some breathing. Do some Wim Hof breathing.
I'll be great.
This is one of the very best things you can do to fight depression and improve your overall health. No, it's not sauna. It is cold plunge. Oh my gosh. There's ice at the bottom.
One of the last ones I wanted to talk about, one of the last two, is a dopamine detox. This has been coming up a lot. There's actually a book called Dopamine Detox.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay. I'm very curious.
The origin of the term dopamine detox came from psychiatrist Cameron Seppa, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, who proposed it as a cognitive behavioral approach to limit impulsive behaviors. Like not as a literal detox from dopamine itself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so like working on the behaviors that ostensibly connected to your dopaminergic pathways.
Exactly. Taking breaks from addictive habits may help people refocus and increase mindfulness, but it doesn't necessarily reduce dopamine levels or reset receptors in any psychological sense.
Yeah, it's again just this metaphor.
Yeah.
For a larger understanding of why you're doing what you're doing or why you crave what you crave.
Exactly. Now, there is a thing called neuroplasticity that we know about. And so pathways can be forged through time. When you're talking about something like an addictive behavior, eventually the brain can start to get a sense there might be another reward for abstaining or having a different behavior, but it does take a lot of time. So sometimes they're talking about a detox is like a 5-day or a 30-day detox from something that what they say is makes you feel good, but we know that that's not true. So that's kind of, again, not fully the case. It takes a long time to build new neural pathways and at least a year from what I've read in addiction studies. And even then, in times of high stress, the brain will 100% do path of least resistance and go to what it knows that it's used that's the most highly effective.
If I need to get somewhere fast, someone's like, hey, why don't you take this highway I've been working on building for like 5 days? I'm like, no, I'm going to take the one that's built already, that's been built.
Love that.
Like, I'm not getting on that on-ramp that looks like you've been working on it for 5 days.
It's still new. What if I get lost?
Also, it's not finished.
Yeah.
You've been working on that for 5 days. There ain't no way that's done.
Exactly.
Anyway, that's my metaphor. That's what I think about.
Love that. I'm sure the psychiatrist that was doing some of the research around it didn't plan on it coming to what it is now with the latest book, Dopamine Detox. The research that I looked at, it said taking breaks from highly stimulating activities can be beneficial. The idea of detoxing from dopamine is more of a myth than science.
Bro, this is how to do a dopamine detox the correct way. Let's go. So for the people that don't know what a dopamine detox is, it's basically just detoxing yourself from the bad dopamine.
I mean, I'm sure the chemicals involved, but there's also there's learning involved, there's memory involved,
Get it.
Structures of your brain involved. It's not just about the chemicals, it's about the brain structures and like how you're learning, the behaviors you go to based on path of least resistance.
Yeah. All the history.
All of that.
I mean, your brain learns by remembering what it learned before, right? And so there's a lot of historical pieces. Exactly. I think we've been getting to this quick fix for low dopamine or serotonin.
Well, we were looking earlier and I did the search thing and I found this other one. Oh, where is it now? Maybe it went away. Maybe my phone heard me complaining about it and they deleted it.
What?
Oh, no, here it is. Free ways to boost happy hormone serotonin. And I mean, it's fine. They're all nice things. Walk in nature, write out goals, get a massage, hug a loved one, play with a pet, drink enough water. You know, like, great.
Okay, cool
but
things.
First of all, serotonin is not a hormone. And also, it's not the, it's not the happy chemical. So there, there's all kinds of posts that are like quick fixes.
Yeah.
Quick tips.
Eat
quick
5
ways.
almonds.
Yeah. This is such an American thing too, but like the happiness is a destination.
Oh. Yeah.
This is a tangent too. I'm so sorry. This is supposed to be a short.
Okay.
Happiness is not a destination. It's okay. Keep going.
I'm going to play this quote from a yoga instructor that said that you can actually achieve happiness all the time.
How to be happy and positive all the time. True happiness is when people's minds do not have the mind to pursue happiness. And when one has cast off the human mind, which is filled with greed, then one will always be happy.
Huh?
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, all the time. Last but not least, more dopamine or serotonin equals better, which is another classic cultural possibly messaging.
Which I could see.
More is better.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense from a very simplistic understanding of anything. Like more money is better. More dopamine is better. More serotonin is better. More sweet treats are better. I don't know. Yeah.
So the reality is that both dopamine and serotonin need to be in balance for optimal functioning. It's about balance for whatever is happening in your particular chemistry and environmental situation. Too much dopamine can lead to risk-taking behaviors, impulsivity, or we saw is related to suicidality, a risk for suicide. And then again, like something like serotonin, and this is a big thing that I've only been hearing about in most recent years, but it's been around for a long time. But too much serotonin can lead to serotonin syndrome, which I'm sure you've heard about. And it's very dangerous and potentially life-threatening.
It's important to know about something called serotonin syndrome. My name is Dr. Jalil Mohammed. I'm a consultant psychiatrist, and my job is to diagnose and treat mental health conditions. Serotonin syndrome is a rare but potentially very serious adverse effect of any medications that increase serotonin levels. It happens when there's too much serotonin in the synapses in the brain, and this can lead to symptoms in 3 main areas.
So balance, not excess, is key. Yeah, balance. It's all about balance.
I love a harmony moment.
And like, that's so unsexy. Like, who's going to sell a shit ton of money or supplements, or who's going to like be famous and say, balance, boom, done.
I mean, nobody. I like it, but no, I'm sure it doesn't make money.
Another one that I wanted to show you all was Dr. Chris Lee.
The dopamine detox is a lie. Dopamine's intrinsic driver is focus. So what you're truly doing, or what you actually want to do, are look at the things that don't give you instant gratification or pleasure. Look at the things that give you instant focus.
I watched the TikTok, then I looked them up. First, his TikTok page says, not an MD. It just says it right on there. No, I really appreciated that. But it says Dr. Chris Lee, not an MD. So then I went to the link tree, and the first thing I found was an app called Opal, which is a focusing app. Then an application to work with him. You just have to apply. He's so special. You have to apply to work with them. Another link is to the same app that says stop your scrolling addiction. And then another link was their favorite supplement, which is ketones, sold by Ketone IQ, which was founded by 2 venture capitalists, tech bros, with Silicon Valley investors, not medical professionals. And guess what this helps you with? Focus. So this person was talking about how a dopamine detox was silly. Right? They're like, a dopamine detox is a lie. What you need is better focus training. But then I go to look at what he's selling, and it's all about focus.
Ketones.
So while there might be some truth to dopamine helps to focus because it's the motivator, why is this person telling us that? So anyway, I would look at the motivation behind why you're hearing dopamine and serotonin being used, and the way that people are talking about it is typically going to support their claim or product.
Right. And I think, as I say often, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Sorry, everybody. Be thoughtful about if someone's trying to sell you something using dopamine or serotonin or another neurotransmitter. And now hopefully you know, or have, maybe a more foundational understanding of the complexities of those neurotransmitters. And it's not that they're not important. It's just that lots of other things are important too.
Also, we can have fun with it and play with it and make like cute memes and talk about
for
dopamine diets. And I'm allowed to still say things like, oh my God, that is like a dopamine color for me, Laurel, that green.
Thank you.
But
it's a dopamine color for me too.
We're allowed, but kind of with that tongue-in-cheek understanding that
it's whimsical.
It's fun.
Not
Thank you.
hard science.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. Hope you liked learning about neurotransmitters. Okay, bye.
Like, share, subscribe, do the things. Pretty please.
Yeah.
If you just have 1 second, just be like, boop, boop, beep.
It's just a little clickety-clack. Doing the little click-click will help us keep doing what we do. And we would love that.
Gracias.
Okay, bye.